it took me years to realise, much further into the conflict, just how sectarian it was and how sectarian we'd become.
Opportunity, let's just say you knew on a particular night that the hall was full of IRA sympathisers and plenty of active members. Would you have been willing to go in and throw the grenade then?
Yeah. There is no doubt in my mind about it. At that stage, I got approached a few times by special branch. I mean, they was there outside the prison. The day I got out, they was literally outside the prison.
Thanks a million now for joining me, Frank. I appreciate you taking the time. We'll go back to like the start with you. You're a Londoner, born and raised, yeah?
Yeah, very much a Londoner, very much a proud Londoner. I've always lived in the London borough of Camden.
You grew up, yeah, for anyone who mightn't know, it'd be very much a working class area, yeah?
Yeah, very much working class and very Irish, John, as well. Yeah, very Irish. I would say probably the majority of my neighbours were Irish. And in my teens, when I worked on the buildings, demolition, that kind of thing. Again, most of my workmates, people I drank with, would have been Irish as well.
You were born in what year?
1957.
Okay, 57. So when you were so the trouble started. I mean, the focus of this is your UDA time, but the trouble started. So when you were what, 12? So
probably. I mean, it wasn't something I was necessarily conscious of, and would have been probably leading up to early teens. Would have been probably politically naive. You'd have known Labour was red. You'd have known Conservative was blue. Your parents were poor, so you assumed it was Labour. I mean, it's pretty basic, I grant you. But I would have been aware of the post office tower. So that was early 70s.
For anyone who might know, yeah, you might give us some context there.
Yeah, sorry, I should. It's very much a landmark in London, particularly Camden. At the back of people might know it. Sort of, if I say Euston, they might know that area, Euston Road. And the post office tower was basically what would be now British Telecom. It would be BT Tower now. So lots of communications, attached to it. But it also had a revolving restaurant, and that's where a bomb was placed. So that would have been early. I think that might have been 72, something like that. So it had gone over my head, for want of a better way of putting it. It didn't affect my immediate community, where despite how close it is, I didn't really sense any animosity. And then 1974 would have been the Birmingham pub bombings. Again, something I was aware of, but didn't have any probably hard and fast thoughts about it. Too busy playing football, probably too busy going to football, and and other things.
Normal teenage stuff. Teenagers don't really think about the news. Yeah. I have heard that as I suppose the 70s and 80s went on, and there was a bit of a sustained IRA bombing campaign in mainly London, but England. I've heard that there was a bit of like anti-Irish sentiment kind of built up. Did you feel any of that or be aware of it?
Not really, because look, to be perfectly honest, it was such a big Irish community. If you take just the borough of Camden itself, so that would incorporate, Camden town. It goes as far afield as Kilburn, parts of Cricklewood, Holloway, Archway. So I think if there was, it maybe in the workplace, maybe if people discussed it in the workplace or privately in the pub, but taking into account that the majority of public houses were owned by, Irish couples, and therefore had quite a large clientele. So it wouldn't have been the place to voice your displeasure, for want of a better way of putting it. but no, I don't think so. I mean, probably the media probably had its say. I would imagine, but I think the longer it went on, then probably I think there was a certain amount. Although I never felt that. I mean, some people might find that quite strange considering where I landed up. It's, as I say, because I had so many Irish friends and worked with so many Irish people, and I even have Irish ancestry on my mother's side. Her single name would have been Spillane or Spillane, whichever way people prefer. But no, I don't really think there was to be. I know in places like Birmingham, I know historically places like Birmingham, there was a real backlash. I think people that worked in various, probably the car industry, where people work quite closely together, I believe there was some anti-Irish sentiment there. I don't ever remember that in London, quite frankly.
Okay, so at one stage in your life, probably around your teens, you ended up falling in with like what we call like a football hooligan group. It was much bigger at the time than now for various reasons. But yeah, you might tell us a bit about that. What age were you? What team? What drew you to it?
Well, I started. I mean, probably in the '60s, mid '60s, I started following Tottnem because most people in my street were, because the dads were, the uncles were, the older brothers, because they'd been so successful in the early '60s. So we kind of just inherited it from them, I suppose. So we played football, in the streets, gable walls, one wall to another. There obviously wasn't as much transport on the roads in those days. And we'd stay out as late as we possibly could and play football. And then eventually you get the opportunity. I mean, you don't get you have the money. You had to have the money to go to football. So if you could manage to go, and as I say, to get to see your heroes, you were quite lucky. But I did get the opportunity. So I suppose I became quite fanatical about it when I was about 13, 14. 14 was the first away game I ever went to. I went to Main Road, Manchester City, and that was on my own. And probably got involved with the violence when I was 15, 16. And it's not because I went looking for it, John. It wasn't because I went looking for it. But it was very much the culture of the day, and an acceptance. If you went to an away game, for example, you had to get from the station to the stadium, etc. So you could take your life in your hands, So you tended to go with a group or stand next to a group of older people, bigger people. But that in turn could cause you even more problems because other older and bigger blokes went looking for those blokes. And I remember being up in Stoke, being outnumbered, and just one of those occasions you had to decide whether you stood or you ran away. And running away wasn't a clever thing to do, because if you got tripped up, you'd be kicked on the floor. So on this particular occasion, I stood, and the following home game, I got hit. I probably threw one punch, and the rest of it I received. But it was enough to stand, and people recognised that. So the following week, when you was at the home game, I probably didn't even go in the pub. I was standing outside the pub, and some people passed comment and said, "Oh, see you last week, mate, up in Stoke. Well done. You stood your ground." You suddenly get a little bit of recognition. There's a little bit of kudos there, isn't there? And that grew. Yeah, that just grew over a course of time. Listen, I've never done drugs, so I can't really speak about it like that. But I like a drink. I can get pleasure from having a drink. I can get pleasure from listening to music. But no, I always say to people, if you travel all the way up to Newcastle, which is like 300 miles or whatever, 250, 300 miles on a Wednesday night, and you get back alive, it's almost like a badge of honour, because people say, you never went to Newcastle last night, and you say, yeah, of course I did. And plus, if people know you're going, then they'll go as well. There's that kind of, certain people go, the rest feel secure in that group. But listen, it's a contradiction, right? It's a contradiction in the sense that Did I do it for a long time? Yes. Was I arrested on numerous occasions? Yes. Looking back on it now, if someone said to me, "Thanks, mate, because of the likes of you, you know, my old man stopped taking me to football," well, I wouldn't feel very good, would I? I wouldn't feel very good about that. And I think what really brought it home for me was the Dublin riot when Ireland played England, and the game got cancelled. And I can remember the picture of a young kid on the pitch crying, and his dad cuddling him, and I thought, I don't agree with that. You know, if you're going to have a punch up, you do it round the back, you do it away from other people, and you're like-minded people. When I saw that, it didn't make me feel particularly good. So I am conscious of my contradictions, and
Right.
that's certainly one of them. You know.
I gotcha. At what stage did you start getting involved in the National Front? Was that straight from football, or?
I don't know if you're aware, John. Before that, I was a young socialist. Yeah, I was a young socialist. Some young people came and knocked on my door one evening. I was probably 16, maybe 15, 16, and they seemed very, nice people, young people, very idealistic. Talked about unemployment, bad housing, education, things that I could identify with, and they invited me to a meeting. And when I got to the meeting, it wasn't actually the Young Socialists; it was the Workers' Revolutionary Party. And this was the first time I ever met the middle class. I didn't know middle class people. I dare say one or two teachers I might have had along the way might have been middle class, but certainly where I live, I didn't really sort of socialise in any way with middle class people. So it was a bit of a shock, because the majority of the banners and so on, regalia, were Workers' Revolutionary Party. I remember they had a paper called Newsline, and I sold the paper quite willingly. I went to rallies and so, but in the end, my mates gave me an ultimatum, and they said, "Look, Frank, is it the football or the politics, mate? What is it?" It didn't take a lot for me to ditch the politics, and didn't return to any politics until I was probably, let me see, I always get confused about maybe 19, something like that. Purely by chance, in a pub, someone gave me a leaflet.
I'm sorry, it's funny, just on the kind of the middle class socialists note. I think George Orwell said in The Road to Wigan Pier, he said that middle class socialists don't care about the working class; they just hate the upper class.
They hate what they can't reach. That's what I found. I found a great deal of envy. What it did do, ironically, I mean, probably back then, maybe there wasn't as much football on the television in those days, but I suppose the most patriotic I ever was probably watching an England football game. It wouldn't have gone beyond that. If anything, the Young Socialist stroke Workers' Revolutionary Party actually brought that in me, because it was very the workers in this country or these countries, the students and I'm thinking, hold on, what about the council workers down the road? I was very much a local community type bloke, and I kept thinking, hold on, what about our own people? It just seemed it definitely brought that out in me. They were also very derogatory about the British Army. I didn't know enough about Irish politics. It's understandable why they were, but it just was a bit foreign to me.
On that note, would you have regarded the people in the 6 counties of Ulster that are the part of the UK? Would you have considered them at the time like fellow Brits? Like if someone had asked you name like the British people, would Northern Ireland kind of be like an afterthought?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think 9 out of 10 people that I knew, or socialised with, and so on. If you said what constituted the United Kingdom, they would kind of name the 4 constituent parties, if you like. Oh yeah, very much that. Yeah, very much that. I think even people who weren't particularly political still associated Northern Ireland with, say, like with the Union flag. they probably wouldn't have realised that the Red Cross that goes that way is a flag of St Patrick. They probably didn't know that much. I didn't know that much till a lot of years later, to be quite honest.
I've heard I interviewed a former UVF member called Eddie Kenner a couple of weeks.
I watched it. Yeah, I did watch it.
Oh, thank you. He said that not him, but he said like a lot of times loyalists from the north will go to England and they'll get called paddies, and it's really offensive to them. Have you ever seen that?
The honest truth, I've heard it more than I've ever seen it. I often wonder if it's one of these, it's one of these urban myths, to be quite honest. I think if you say things enough times, people assume that that's the way it was. I don't doubt it probably did happen. I can imagine it happened. But I can only say the circles, that I mixed in. And I say that because 9 times out of 10, if you met someone from Northern Ireland, from what would have been, the Protestant Unionist, Loyalist community, if one of a better way of putting it, they were very quick to tell you. They were very, very quick to tell you who they were and where they were from. Whether that was they felt that would give them a sense of acceptance, much quicker into the community, I don't know. In London, it could actually backfire on them, because talking to someone with a London accent, you would assume, oh, he's English, he's British. Well, quite honestly, he could be Irish, because that person's parents, grandparents, etc. So you didn't talk to someone with a London accent and just assume that they were English, because that wasn't the case.
Sorry, I interrupted you there. You were about to mention when you were about 19, your next involvement in politics. If you could go back to that.
Yeah, I was just in a pub one evening, and a good friend of mine worked down in Smithfield Meat Market, and he gave me a leaflet, and I put it in my back pocket. I was in a pub, I was having a drink, I was interested in looking at leaflets. Put it in the back pocket, and when I got home, there was a Union flag on it. It probably had some sort of wording like Britain for the British, or I would imagine something like that, some sort of slogan. And it did resonate with me a little bit. And the next time I saw him, he said, "Oh, did you read the leaflet?" And I said, "Yeah, I read the leaflet." And I was still politically naive. I wasn't an automatic convert. And he said, "Oh, there's going to be a meeting in a hotel in King's Cross, which isn't far from where I live, quite frankly." And he said, "Why don't you come along?" Well, of course, when I got there, I was surrounded by blokes like me. I was surrounded by working class fellas, people I could feel comfortable. I was comfortable with, if you like. And the people have asked me since, and they said, "Well, I had I'm trying to think about a conversation. I can't think of her name there. Patricia Devlin. Patricia Devlin.
Oh yeah. I've seen your interview. I've seen your interview with her.
Yeah, and I said to her, the perception is clearly, and I understand it. Don't get me wrong. The perception was, oh, you must be racist. Well, I'd say I was more patriotic. I was more nationalist. I wanted the best for Britain at that time. But I'm not going to make excuses. I'm not going to say on demonstrations or protests, and when we were being attacked, or when we were selling papers or canvassing, I'm not going to say a racist word never passed my lips, because I'm pretty sure, even though I'm going back a long time, I'm pretty sure it did. But the irony is, most of the violence wasn't with any minority groups. It was with mainly left-wing activists. That was the irony. I'm not saying that there wasn't black or Asian people amongst them at different times, but by far the majority of the confrontations and the violence took place with fellow white people. So it was a bit of a strange dynamic, to be quite honest.
How much of the focus of your politics at the time was keeping non-white people out of Britain?
Well, looking back on it again, I mean, I actually got interviewed by by a young black fella who's got his own podcast, and we had quite an open discussion. And I said to him, I said, look, how many people do you think that was involved, right, in the National Front or whatever level? How many of them honestly thought that there was going to be repatriation? How exactly was you going to go about that? How was you actually going to enforce that? What was you going to do? March people down to Southampton and, at gunpoint and put them on boats. How was that? I think it was, my understanding was it was more to curb it. It was more to listen, as someone once said, a little bit of salt in the soup, can improve it. Too much salt and it can ruin it. So I think I kind of adopted that sort of attitude. And I lived in a very multiracial, community. I could see at that point where there was distinctions being made, whereby, if we're in our youth club, for example, you'd have a couple of little pool tables, you'd have a little record player. We'd want to play our music, and clearly black fellas wanted to play their music, and there'd be confrontations and there'd be fights. You'd always find the youth leaders always took their part. And that caused a lot of animosity. So that was a bit of a recruiting tool for right-wing groups, because people got upset, people got disillusioned, and people believed that they were being taken over and they were being displaced and so on and so forth. And I can see where some of that is true or was true, and I can see other bits of it where it was exaggerated and it was propaganda.
Okay, so what how long did you spend in there, and what prompted the eventual leaving?
To be perfectly honest, it was the Ulster politics. I think it was the Ulster politics, because there was a kind of how can I put it? It was, I didn't feel the same. Look, I should explain this to people. I wrote a book a few years ago, and after reading the book, I kind of went, is that me? Is that how the world sees me? Because I'm obviously not observing me every day of the week, listening to what I'm saying, and regulating my actions, if you like. And I realised every single thing I get involved with, I take it to its extreme. And that's just a fact. I recognise that. And that's why I'm very, very conscious what I volunteer to do these days. Very, very conscious. I joked with someone, I actually said, if you invited me to your local church, give it 6 weeks, I'll be up in the pulpit. 6 months later, I'll be like Mr. Paisley, I've formed my own church. But I know that now. I actually know that, and I recognise it. And of course, I became the local organiser for Camden National Front. It had to happen. It just one of those. It was same as the football. I became a leader at football. Through the National Front, obviously different publications, and again propaganda, and people were coming from Northern Ireland. They were settling in London, so you'd go to meetings, and there'd be someone from Belfast sitting next to you, and you'd have a conversation. You'd build up friendships and so on. So I found myself slowly being less active, if you like. Albeit the National Front still used to do things like that were pro Northern Ireland, or pro Ulster, and would oppose Republican parades, etc. And it got more physical. It basically got a lot more physical. And then we were going into pubs that were selling Republican papers, or troops out papers, or pubs we knew that were collecting money, for the provisionals. So I actually did a talk a little while ago for the security industry. There was a seminar, and someone asked me about making the jump from being a football hooligan to a paramilitary. And no one had ever asked me that question the way it was asked, and it threw me a little bit. And all of a sudden it came to me, and I said, well, if you look at the Balkans conflict, a lot of the paramilitaries of the Serbs and the Croats were actually recruited from the football terraces. So if you take into account, you've had a large group of people that are used to standing side by side, fighting, showing a degree of loyalty to each other. Doesn't take a lot to put a uniform on them and show them how to use a gun. So it was a little bit not as extreme as that, but there were similarities. It was almost like a natural progression that you were used to fight and you were used to standing your ground, and it was basically, listen, it was almost like in a punch up, and then someone gives you an ideology. So it's it makes it nice and easy for you, because you can have a fight and you can say, well, I'm in the right. I'm fighting the enemy. But no, I did start to get away from the right wing politics. But that said, probably the majority of people that I either recruited or sort of operated with, 9 out of 10 of them, I would say, all came from a right wing background. So in that sense, it worked as a recruiting body. It worked.
Before you were involved in the UDA, and I guess probably before your National Front time too, if you woke up one morning and opened up the newspaper and it said that the 6 counties of Ulster that are part of the UK are now part of Republic of Ireland, would you have cared? Would it have mattered? Would you felt like you lost something or anything?
Probably not. No. Probably. I think that passion, if you like, comes after you've made acquaintances with people, you've made friendships with people, and then their family members have been killed, or their family members have been interned, or their family members have been imprisoned. It becomes more personal. It becomes more personal, and it took me years to realise, much further into the conflict, just how sectarian it was and how sectarian we'd become, not consciously, but it kind of crept in. Oh well, they vote Sinn Féin, and they support the IRA, so therefore, and that sounds quite cold. But when the reverse was happening to our community, for want of a better way of putting it, and again, I don't think that was ever my intent. I don't think it was ever my intent to say I don't like Irish people, because that would have been a lie. It would have been my intent to say I don't like Catholic people, because that would have been a lie. But you could almost give excuses at certain times, because it was one of, oh, fuck them. We're doing to them what they're doing to us. You kind of, your targets almost become less discerning. And again, that's another contradiction. Like the football, it's another contradiction. It's something I would say I don't agree with. And yet I probably found myself passively celebrating it.
Okay, so what age were you, and what year was it when you first joined the London UDA?
What happened prior to that is just to give you a little bit of background. What you would have done was there were 2 parades every year in London. In January you had the Bloody Sunday parade, so that would have been the Troops Out movement, and in August you had the anti-immigrant parade, which would have been the Irish Freedom movement. And that was in Holloway Road, North London. We used to comment, because it got. The anti-internment parades used to go on, and internment had finished long ago. But listen, if it gets people on the street, I suppose I can see it from their point of view. Well, what used to happen is we would attack those parades. Invariably, a few weeks before these parades, there'd be a bomb in London or on the mainland, and we think, "Are you kidding me? You're going to walk up our streets." If it had been, say, for example, the Troops Out parade, which was, I think, a legitimate parade, it wanted justice. for Bloody Sunday. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem is the people at the front of that parade, who we know are, Sinn Féin or Sinn Féin stroke something else. Right? When you've got an Irish Republican band, more than one band usually, going, all right. Well, I'm sorry, that takes away the legitimacy of what that parade's all about. And various banners with various slogans. So if we attack those parades, people will say, "Oh, those people have got a legitimate right, democratic right to walk the streets and have a peaceful demonstration," and I would agree. But I would say the nature of that parade changes when it became you'd have hundreds of Scots, Celtic fans would come down. It was a day out for them, come to London and sing their IRA songs. Sorry, that's not the same as looking for justice for Bloody Sunday. So we started to get a bit of a reputation for attacking these parades and other things that were going on at different times, Republican rallies and so.
And you're what age?
20s, living in the 20s then. And then it got to the stage, to be perfectly honest, somebody said one day, it could have even have been me, if I'm honest, it could have been. Which is not exactly fair, is it? We're throwing a few punches and they're blowing us up. Not exactly fair, is it? We need to do something about it. Well, do what? What are we going to do about it? We're not paramilitaries. 9 out of 10 of us, we weren't Orangemen, we weren't apprentice boys. We might have chose Rangers over Celtic, but that was it. That was it. And eventually somebody suggested that we approach someone, and there was someone who knew someone who was a conduit. He was an Ulsterman, and he introduced us to the chap who was at that time in the OC for the UDA in London, and he was a Scotsman. And I went along with a friend, and we met him, and we were thoroughly unimpressed. And I made the comment to the original person. I said, if you think I'm putting my friends, under this man's jurisdiction, you can forget it. Well, of course, what that then did was my friends then said, no, we're going to follow anyone, we're going to follow you. But there was an existing UDA, as far as I was concerned, you had to be respectful, of those people. But what we did know is that the person who'd introduced us couldn't wait to take up the position himself. But we then found out that he liked the idea of being in charge, but he didn't want to be as militant as what we wanted to be. And we proved that one night. We actually, a friend brought a catalogue of weapons along and basically said, look, we can have what we want. And his words to the effect was, oh, good man, speak to Frank. And another friend went, hold on, you're in charge. We take a dive, you take a dive. And we could see he wasn't up for it. And we visited him later in the week, and he basically said he was standing down, and I said, no, you're not being fucking stood down. So there was me suddenly talking like I was a paramilitary. There was me talking like I was suddenly in charge. No one had said I was in charge. But that's how it started. That was the beginning, and then we met people from all over England, eventually Scotland, but that wasn't our jurisdiction. We met people from all the major industrial towns and cities throughout, where there were groups, gauges as they call them, and we identified who we believed was militant and who wasn't. And we weren't very popular. We were called the Cockney Upstarts. They didn't particularly like us, but we weren't messing around, and we proved that on a few occasions that we weren't messing around.
Can I ask one thing? Would I be correct in saying that if the IRA just decided that bombing mainland UK wasn't a good idea and never did it, and there wasn't people going through your streets chanting IRA and singing rebel songs, would I be right in saying that like the cause of keeping those 6 counties part of the UK wouldn't have been one that you would have been interested in had the IRA bombs and the people in your street been...
If that hadn't happened, you're probably right. But if it had got to a certain stage and then there'd been a cessation, so to speak, it would have been too late, because I'd put too much into it. I put too much time, effort, emotion, organisation. It was too late. I mean, I always like to think, you're called a defence association. So you kind of claim the moral high ground, don't you? You say, well, I'm only defending, my fellow British citizens. Like people, went off to the Falklands to do it, or they went, wherever. I'm no different. I'm doing this. I'm doing the same. But I'll qualify this by saying I do a talk called the treadmill. And what I say to people is, you get on the treadmill, press the green button, and you go forward. You don't look to the left, don't look to the right. You just keep going forward. Now, one day, you press the red button, and you get off the treadmill, and you say to yourself, how the fuck did I get here? Because all you was doing was going forward. And if you've talked yourself up, if you've challenged other people and you've said you're not militant enough, and then you've put yourself in the frame to be the militant one, well, you've got a responsibility. You've got leadership responsibilities. People expect you to carry out what you say. And I say to people, be careful, because before you get on the treadmill, I always say, question people why they're encouraging you to get on there. Why are you getting on there? And that can even happen in a career. In your career, you could get carried away.
Did you see your role as in the London UDA? Considering you weren't in Ulster at all, did you see your main role to be arming those who were?
I used to travel quite extensively. I used to visit, Northern Ireland quite regularly. Not every meeting, but I attended more than enough in the council meetings. I knew everybody who was anybody, for want of a better way of putting it. So yeah, I did ingratiate myself. In fact, the irony is, John, that it got to a stage where we became too militant for them, because some of the things that we were proposing, I think they went, oh, hold on, we just thought there was a few boys from London and they had some allies from Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, we didn't recognise just how passionate we were, just how committed we were, and we were probably a little bit too vocal at times, and I think clearly I understand it more clearly now. But you assume if someone's in charge of hundreds of men, he must be trusted, mustn't he? His men have put him in that position, so he must be trustworthy. So you can talk to him, you can confide in him. Well, of course, over a course of time, you find out he's working for Special Branch, or the RUC, or military intelligence. So the people you're trying to impress and saying, "Don't worry, we'll do our bit back home," you're just giving them information. Well, of course, and then that started a process of us being followed. And what would happen is we'd say we've been doing reconnaissance on someone for 3 months, 6 months, whatever. Well done.
Like an IRA guy, or
yeah, or someone who was supporting their prisoners, for example. And but then all of a sudden we'd get a visit. Oh, lads, a friend of ours in the RUC is in contact with somebody on the mainland, and they've said they're watching a group of fellas in London. Now, we'll never know whether that was true or not. We'll never know whether that was true. What we want you to do now is be political for 6 months. Keep your head down. Well, that gets a bit frustrating after a while. when you're out, you know, 2 or 3 times in a week, you're following someone back from their constituency office, or someone who organises, you know, meetings or rallies and so on. And there was a wide range of people. There was a wide range of targets, and that became very, very frustrating, you know, after a time. But we were very, very committed, very, very, and there would be certain people over there who knew that, who knew just how much. Certainly when we reached the 90s, which, you know, was a really, really, the early 90s was a very violent time, because there was a change within the UDA for a start. You know, the younger element, for want of a better way of putting it, you know, deposed some of the older ones by saying they're not militant enough. You know, and we recognised that, because the fact we wanted to be militant, they embraced us. And but, you know, there was a price to pay. I mean, eventually I got stopped by military intelligence one evening, sat in the back of a car, and they told me chapter and verse what I'd done the weekend before. They said where I'd been on the Saturday night, Sunday morning. I'd picked up weapons, taken them to a location. They were going to be given to somebody, and then 2 people were going to shoot a Republican in Manchester. They told me the whole bit, the whole plan. I couldn't believe it. And it was only the facts I thought to myself, well, I'm sitting in the back of a car, aren't I? I'm not in an holding centre. You know, I'm at the police station, and I was a little bit, well, go on then, nick me. Come on, nick me. And they just laughed. And they said, don't worry, Frank, we'll give you enough rope when you land yourself. Probably 2 years later, you know, I did.
How did you, okay, firstly, like what kind of training, if any, did you do to become like a good operator, and how did you view the competency of your IRA opponents, we'll say?
I don't think we ever matched them. I don't think we ever matched them militarily or propaganda-wise, for that matter. No, I don't think so. I think there was a good intent. I think the numbers were disproportionate of people that were actually active, as opposed to just wearing a badge that says they were. You know, I always say to people, say, "Oh, my mate was in the UDA," and I go, "Oh yeah, what did he do?" You know, what was it? And I have to explain to people, you know, your granny can be in the UDA. It doesn't make her. You know, she's not the UFF. You know,
she's not a paramilitary. Yeah,
no, she's not a militant. You know, and if she's in the LP, you know, the Lawyers Prisoners Age, you know, she's collecting for prisoners and their families. I'm not saying there's not a role, and which is probably why the UDA itself remained legal for so long. Obviously, you know, a lot longer than some people would have wanted. But no, we had various things, like we knew someone that had some land, had some fishing and shooting rights on some land, and so we would have the privacy of, you know, the barn, and we'd have filing cabinets, and so we would test, you know, what weapons we could acquire, and then, you know, so some pretty basic, you know, basic training, for want of a better word. A certain level of fitness, and probably not very well thought out, if I'm honest. Probably being consumed by wanting to do it, and not even thinking about the consequences, not even really thinking about the consequences. I mean, some of the things we planned on doing, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you now. I'd be very, very surprised if I wasn't still in prison. So that's the extent of what we wanted to do. And even somebody, you know, what's his name? I'm thinking of his name. Patrick McGee.
The Brighton bomb. Yep.
Yeah, the Brighton bomb. Yeah. I was in Dublin last year at Professional Speaking Association's Global Summit, and I was on a stage with the lady who he has been working with for over 20 years.
Jo Berry.
Jo Berry, yeah. Jo Berry.
I've spoken to her, yeah. I've interviewed her. Very nice lady, incredible lady.
And I was on the stage with her, and she she'd just come back from Italy, where there'd been something going on, and he was there. Patrick McGee was there, and some ex-loyalist prisoners, and people from around the world involved other conflicts. He was supposed to be there, which would have been a bit of a challenge for me, because that would have been the first time I'd have had, been that close to somebody, if you like, and an old adversary. But when asked, and people said, do you class him as a terrorist? And I said, well, let's put it this way. If I class him as a terrorist, I've got to class myself as a terrorist. Because if I'd have had the same opportunity as him, if there'd have been a, Sinn Féin, ASSASSINATE, whatever, if there'd have been that opportunity, I'd have done exactly the same. What I would say is what might have prevented me from doing that. But it's easy to say now in the cold light of day. I'd like to think, but this is where I say you kind of lose your rationale. I'd like to think I'd have thought about the people that worked in the hotel, and and the people, other people that were staying in the hotel. I'd like to think that would have prevented me. I'd like to think that, but saying that, I'm going back a lot of years now. I mean, I've been out of prison 30 years this year. So you can't really capture the emotion and the thought processes that you had back then to the same degree.
You mentioned that there was things that you planned on doing that would result in you still being in prison. Now, can you go into some of the?
I've been pretty open about it. I've been pretty open about it in the past. There would have been 3 distinct British MPs, and I use the British bit very loosely, who, as far as we were concerned, were legitimate targets. We saw them as traitors. We expressed that opinion. That's what I'm saying. We expressed that to the inner council. And we said, look, we don't understand if the likes of Conservative MP like Ian Gow, can be blown up. Well, he actually wasn't blown up. I think he was he shot, Ian Gow? I'm not sure. But either way, he was murdered. You've got British MPs, Labour MPs, and by the way, I'm not a Tory. I'm not particularly Labour either, but. So this isn't in defence of the Conservative Party, just human life. And you've got MPs, Labour MPs, who have basically invited Sinn Féin / IRA to the House of Commons, to County Hall, to Islington Town Hall, and looked after them, and basically assisted their supporters. Well, we classed them as traitors. And we thought, well, you're eligible. You're legitimate targets. You want to walk at the head of these parades, and there be bands playing IRA tunes. Then, as far as we're concerned, you're a legitimate target. And it was quite simple. It was Ken Livingston, John McDonnell, and Jeremy Corbyn. And we made no bones about that. And that's what I say. It's very difficult to sit here now and talk so openly and so bluntly. But that's a fact of life. It's just that was the atmosphere. That was the thinking at the time, and that's what brought a lot of heat on us.
How far into the planning did you get? Like, did you actually have a method selected for killing each?
What we had to do was start. Certain people had to have a certain amount of autonomy. It wasn't for general conversation. As I say, you could have had 50 people in the London UDA. They weren't all gunmen. There was there was no pretense that they were, but there were some. And there were some that were prepared to go to certain lengths. And I have to be careful. I make the point as if I'm talking about other people, not me. I don't really say too much about what my role was, which is why I say people have had, people had autonomy. But the luckiest one, I would say, on 2 occasions, would have been Ken Livingston. But there was reconnaissance on the other 2. And as I say, I sit here now and I listen to my own voice saying, and I'm like, what? I'm like, like I say about the treadmill, how far did you allow yourself to go before well, you didn't press the red button, did I? I didn't. I got caught. That was the red button, and that's what done me a favour. That's the best thing that could have happened to me.
Were you planning on a car bomb or shooting or?
Well, only because it was lack of opportunity. If we'd have had bombs, I mean, I've been quite open about a consignment of hand grenades that we looked at. We had somewhere to test them. We had a quarry. We had someone, an ex-soldier that confirmed that they were legitimate. But of course, you can only try throw a grenade once, can't you? So but we were set up. I found out years later on another occasion when I was questioned by military intelligence, they brought the subject up of hand grenades. So we were lucky that we didn't pursue that. And I've said this as well. I've been quite open about it, John. What on earth would we have done with them hand grenades? I dread to think. I made a big mistake. I said in an interview that I would have, and this is me personally, not trying to deflect, that that I would have had no qualms about walking into an Irish centre, community centre, social club, and throwing an hand grenade. What I didn't say, and that was reported in the Sunday World paper. That was actually reported in the paper that I'd said that. And the next interview that I did with somebody, I had to say, listen, I need to explain that. He wasn't going to do it while a load of young Irish girls were doing Irish dancing. I wasn't going to do it when a group of older Irish ladies were playing bingo. I'm talking about the building. Destroying the building, not the people in the building.
If you had the opportunity, let's just say you knew on a particular night that the hall was full of, at the very least, IRA sympathizers and plenty of active members, would you have been willing to go in and throw the grenade then?
Yeah. There is no doubt in my mind. There's at that stage. When so many of your friends and associates have been killed, as I say, interned, imprisoned. I was regularly visiting. Well, originally I was visiting Camden Road. Then obviously it was the Maze and it was the Gabri. I was going to funerals. It got more and more personal, and the responsibility became more because people were pushing me to show leadership. Well, I was the one that had called it on with other people and said, look at you with your Loyalist tattoos and your badge and your T-shirt. What are you doing? And I've said this before that, I won't name it geographically, but me and a friend visited a social club, and they didn't like the way we spoke to them. And when we left the club and went to go in the car park, they were going to come out and sort us out. Well, it's only because one of us had a 9mm Brennan automatic inside their overcoat. Basically said, "Well, keep coming," and it diffused the situation. But again, it heightened us because immediately some of that group of people dropped out because they thought, "Fuck that! The geezer's just pulled a gun on us. He's only come up here for a conversation." But it made the point.
Would you say that being involved in like this paramilitary group and being so kind of violence orientated, did that change you? Like, was there a different Frank halfway through his UDA time from the Frank that joined at the beginning?
In a sense, I was far more militant, whereas I'd started politically. I think I think if there'd have been, I think if there'd have been the facility for me to have got involved politically, then I probably would have. I probably would have. But there is that element of, you know, I don't like barstool preachers, you know, and I still know, you know, to this day, 40 years later, will be complaining about something and never done anything about it. You know, I know blokes now, my age and older than me, and they still complained about immigration. I say, well, what was you doing about it 40 years ago? Same as what you're doing now, sitting there complaining about it. So don't bother talking to me about it now, because I'm not bothered. You know, that goes over my head. But yeah, look, people say to me, "Have you changed? Have you changed?" And I tend to say, I haven't changed. Circumstances have changed, and I'm really glad those circumstances have changed. And I wouldn't do anything to reverse that, you know, that situation. But have I changed? I'm not sure. Am I not still the same old football hooligan? But yeah, I'm just a bit too old to be doing it. I don't know, because if it's still in there, if the passion's still there. But would I do anything to jeopardise my family now? No, certainly not. If I was asked about regret, I would say, do I regret things? Only the pressure, you know, and I put my own family under, and the fact I left them vulnerable. That I regret. I clearly regret the whole thing. I clearly regret the whole conflict. I wish it had never happened. And it's okay talking in hindsight. And I reckon, listen, I'm old enough and more mature enough to now to remember there was injustices on both sides. And you know, and as John McMichael used to say, no one was exclusively right, and no one was exclusively wrong. And I kind of work from there. If we can have a conversation and meet in the middle, then, you know, then fantastic.
Were you ever targeted by the IRA, INLA, any Republican groups yourself?
Only in a physical sense, you know, street confrontation, if you like, pub confrontation. Not as far as I'm aware. I never received an Osmond warning of the police at all. And I'm pretty philosophical about it. Believe you me, I'm not complacent. If I was a young dissident Republican on the mainland and I wanted to make a name for myself, well, I know I'll target. I'll target me, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm a legit. Although I'm inactive, I'd still say that I would be a legitimate target. So I still have that little bit of, you know, I'm still conscious of people in the street. I'm still conscious of vehicles, you know, number plates. I'm still conscious how I get from A to B. I don't think that's gonna leave me.
Can you take me to the point when your time in your time in the UDA outside of prison ended and you were caught?
Well, I was caught in Birmingham in a car park with 7 handguns.
In what year?
93. So 30 years ago. And it was 9 handguns and 240 rounds of ammunition. And I ended up being remanded in a Category A prisoner in Birmingham Prison, Winson Green, and very old, you know, Victorian type prison, very strict regime. Still, you know, slopping out 1 shower a week, but phone calls recorded, no gym, you know, no library. You were banged up, and that was it. You know, it was the last bastion of the Prison Officers Association, and they loved telling you that as well. And funny enough, that's the prison where the Birmingham Six were held.
Did you get charged with being a member of a terrorist group, or just having the weapons?
No, it's very, very, very strange circumstances. when I was put in a cell in the police station, it was the cell nearest to the desk. So I had my ear up against the door, the door frame. And I heard a young, ordinary police officer turn around and say, and this was a Monday, this was a bank holiday Monday. And he said, "Oh, is this the tail end of Saturday's operation?" So that told me another friend of mine had been followed on the Saturday. And when I first started to get questioned, I said, "Are you charging me under the Prevention of Terrorism Act?" And they went, "No, it's what do they call it? No, just criminal charges." So that shocked me straight away that they hadn't done and they hadn't done me under the PTA. And then also no membership. They did not charge me. In fact, they did. I don't even remember them making reference to the UDA. Don't remember them even making reference to it. We had a theory afterwards. A good friend of mine from South London was arrested in Scotland not long afterwards with weapons. And another friend from the East Midlands was caught with weapons. We kind of had a feeling it was like the peace process was being discussed, shall we say. They've been following us for years, and I can imagine the resources at the EU. We got the feeling that eventually they just said, "You know what? Let's just throw the net over all of them and get them off the street." And I believe that to this day. I believe that to this day. They just decided, let's just get them off. We've got bigger things to discuss. We've got bigger things to sort. Eventually decommissioning and all kinds of other stuff. I actually believe they just wanted us off the street.
How was it that you actually got caught? Were you meeting with like an undercover? Had it been set up over a long time, or?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was one person in particular from Northern Ireland, but the chain of events actually started from here. Ironically, from an ex-NF member who eventually, as a result of him going over to the other side, so to speak, he had to leave this country. He was warned by special branch to leave this country, and I think he went to New Zealand. He went for about 10 years. Look, for a better way of putting it, how can I put this subtly? There's still a bounty on his head, on that fella's head. He basically put me away from my family and other people as well. So it was him. I know exactly who it is. That's not to say that there were, a variety of other people that were probably talking and giving general information, but I can identify one person.
Fair enough. How long did you spend in prison, and did your commitment to, let's say, like the UDA cause, did that wane over the time, or did it stay?
Enhanced it, if anything, because you suddenly wear it as a badge of honour. I'm a loyalist prisoner.
How long prison you spent?
Well, I was looking at 10 to 14 years. One of my co-defendants got off after 6 weeks. They couldn't prove that he knew it was in the bag. So the only person that could have, got him sentenced would have been me. Clearly, I wasn't going to do that. I was then left with the chap who'd come over from Belfast, who I was giving the bag to, and well, I'm sorry, I found him in total embarrassment. I didn't consider him a paramilitary at all, and he basically did a deal. He did a deal. I believe he could have got off. I believe if he'd have kept his nerve, he'd have got off. And thank God he didn't. But they did a deal that he'd get 2 to 3 years. And so on the day of set, so he could have challenged it, but he actually went. We didn't go. Neither of us got a trial. I'd gone guilty because what concerned me was how many other things they were going to bring up. I just wanted this out of the way. Lock me up, put me out of the way, and forget about me. Do not think of any more charges. you know, conspiracy to this or conspiracy to that and so on. And on the day they gave him, I'll never forget, the judge said, I sentence you to 30, and I thought he was going to say years, and he said 30 months. So the 9 months he'd done on remand counted for 18 months. He had 6 months left to do. The judge had already previously explained certain bits of the law to the press and the law students that were in the court. And he basically made a little bit of a speech, made it quite clear that he held me responsible. And he gave me 5 years. And I remember standing there, and one of the court screws, you know, went to pull my arm as if to say, come on, you know. And I went, what are you fucking doing? I got aggressive, what are you doing? You know, and he went, he's give you 5 years. And I said, yeah, and the fucking rest. I'm waiting for the next bit. And the judge got up. And I couldn't believe it. Anyway, when I went downstairs, I was allowed to speak to my barrister and his junior. And I passed my co-defendant's barrister. And he said to me, you are a very lucky man. So I had to keep the pretense up and go, well, how'd you work that out, mate? I'm going to prison for 5 years. He told him he must have told him everything. Anyway, when I went into a little room, barrister and his junior were there, and they both had a piece of paper, and one had 12 written on it, and one had 10. Oh, I should tell you, the judge said I was looking down both barrels of a double-figured sentence. So I was opening for 8. I thought, well, we're going to start with 10 now, if it's double, you know, double barrel sentence or double-figured sentence. Anyway, I said, well, how does that work out? One's got 12 and one's got 10. Now, I didn't understand the law. I do now. What the judge was telling the press and telling the students was he could not give me a disproportionate sentence. So he'd given me twice what he'd given him. He made it clear he wanted to give me a lot more. If he'd have given me any more, we'd have been able to appeal the sentence. That's how it was explained. So I was a very, very lucky man. Very lucky man.
In prison, I know you weren't concerned about having like political status. You were happy to be kind of housed as a criminal, but like if there had been a similar thing like with the IRA man and some of the loyalists in the north, would you have been committed enough to do like a hunger strike or a blanket protest, something like that?
I wouldn't have done it. The reason I wouldn't have done it is my family. I wouldn't have put my family under that. I put them under enough pressure and enough anxiety. I wouldn't have done that. I mean, one of the walls in my cell was covered in artwork. You know, it was covered in, you know, handkerchiefs from the maze and different, you know, crafts that people had sent me. And I got a lot of cards. I got a lot of support, you know, from fellow Loyalist prisoners. And no, it was. I always say to people, there's nothing clever in getting caught, is there? The people you should be buying a pint for, shaking hands with, or patting them on the back are the ones who didn't get caught. Well, that's for me to know, isn't it? That's I know, I clearly know who they are. But unfortunately, they don't get any credit, do they? But no, from a prisoner point of view, every day I woke up as a Loyalist prisoner in my mind. And I remember when I got sentenced, that a particular, the head security screw came up to me and he said to me, oh, well, it won't be long now, he said, before you get sent to Long Lartin. And Long Lartin had a few IRA prisoners in it. He said, oh, not long now, he says, before you get... I said, oh, is that right? You're sending me to Long Lartin? And he said, yeah. I said, well, let me tell you something now. You see, when I get there, the first thing I'm going to do is fucking do one of them IRA guys. All right? I said, when I'm up in front of the governor, I'm going to quote your name. I said, let me see if you're fucking smiling then. And he did. It took the smile out of his face. Now, I never did get sent to Long Lartin, so I'll never know. That was probably him just, you know, thinking he was being a little bit smart. But no, I'd kind of made a little pact with myself. I leave me alone. We'll get on great, you know. But there's no way I'm going to be a victim. There's no way I'm going to let myself be a victim.
Okay, so your loyalist paramilitary involvement ended because the conflict itself ended. Would I be concerned?
I
When?
did learn another way. I did learn. I got into a little bit of local politics as well over the community politics. We realised you can't go around shooting everyone you don't like and blowing them up and threatening them. And why not concentrate on trying to help the communities that you're going to visit? In the interface areas, and that's what we did. We started to hold functions. There was one particular, estate. It was difficult to go and get basic amenities because they would get attacked. So we came back and we raised a load of money and we got a container converted into a shop, so they could have basic milk, bread, and so on their estate. And I got more like that. We had fun days for children. Bouncy castles. We organised a football tournament in the Shankill Leisure Centre. For super young fellas, the football teams, we got them their medals. I became more active. I became more active that way, and that in turn curbed my militancy. Look, I hadn't even been out of work. I hadn't even been out of prison a week, right? And I passed the pub with my wife on a Sunday. So I'd been out 4 days, and someone was in the pub singing an Iran song, and when this war is over. I ran in that pub to attack the fella. My wife standing on the pavement shaking her head. I hadn't even been out a week, so I hadn't changed at all. But there'd be no rehabilitation. There was no attempt of rehabilitation at all.
That incident was in what year?
It wouldn't have worked anyway. Sorry, John.
And that incident was in what year? The year you got out was
that would have been 96, I suppose. No, sorry, just before Christmas, 95.
Okay, so it's not over.
Things were still raw. Things were still raw. It took a time to go over to the. Let's put it this way: in the newspapers here and in the media here, it was telling you that there was, because of the agreement, there was peace. Well, not the interface areas that I was visiting. There wasn't any peace. Whether that was Belfast or Londonderry. There was the Fountain Estate, for example. We raised money for fire blankets and fire extinguishers because they were getting regularly petrol from them. We raised money for the local primary school when I met the headmistress because they couldn't afford to keep the minibus running. So all my extreme gene, if you like, that had been directed in a militant sense, I then put that over to being more community based.
Okay, so when would you say your loyalist activity completely, even the peaceful, the community based stuff ended? When was it you kind of broke from it?
I think that I got approached a few times by special branch. I mean, they was there outside the prison. The day I got out, they was literally outside the prison, offering me money to set up a business for myself because I got certain qualifications. In prison. They visited my house and offered me money to buy, and believe it, you're going to find us hard to buy weapons. They offered me money to buy weapons and a retainer every month. And the thinking behind it was because they'd rather have somebody in charge who they knew. And everyone would go, oh, look, there's Frank. Look, Frank's back on the horse again. Good old Frank. But the deal was that none of those weapons landed up in the hands of anybody that might use. That was the deal. And I said, go on, you can fuck off now. Your 10 minutes is up.
That is insane. They made you legit offer to be a legal arms dealer, and just the guns just don't end up in any.
Well, they wanted my persona. They wanted. Look, it's better to have someone me back in charge, isn't it? That everybody radiates around. And that you're paying me to make sure. I would still encourage people. What they wanted me to encourage people to go and buy guns, but as long as I kept the guns here, for want of a better way of putting it, I didn't send them over the border, or whichever way they wanted to do it. I don't know whether they said, "Oh, make out you're delivering them on Saturday, but you tell us where they're going to be, and we just come and get them, but you'll be all right." And I just said, "Fuck off, your 10 minutes is up."
On that note, that's the kind of thing that they wouldn't admit to, and they wouldn't. It would be kind of more denied.
No.
Did you come across other kind of sneaky things like that over your years?
Well, you know, I mean, I remember they phoned me up once at Christmas, you know, and said to me, "Oh, hello, Frank, it's Dave." I said, "I don't know any Daves." "Oh, you do? Yeah, yeah, yeah. We have a chat now." I said, "Do we?" "Oh, we want to take you out for a Christmas drink." You know, and I said, "Oh, that's ironic. I've just given up drinking." They went, "Fuck off." We ran the corner in a brand Vauxhall Astra. You know, and then you know, that was the same thing. "Oh, what's happening over the water, Frank? What are the boys saying?" I said, "Well, what if I can tell them? What makes you think they're telling me?" Well, they were telling me, ironically, but I said, "What makes you think they're telling me?" It was just to let you know that they're around. You know, certain faces, you know, came over to London for the weekend. You know, we'd be followed. We knew it. They made no bones about it. You know, you knew you was being followed. Um, but no, there were certain people that came into our company, if you like, and you just knew, you just thought, well, you know, you knew they weren't right. The same thing with the grenades. The same thing with the grenades. Your gut feeling said this is too easy. This is being up with. And the fella was reluctant one moment to let us have a certain amount, and then it was almost have what you like, you know, take as many as you need. And we thought, no, that don't sound right to me, you know. But no, there were different offers. I mean, you know, we had situations where at the airport, I got stopped regularly for years, even with my family, coming back from family holidays. And in the end, I had to get in touch with the Home Office, you know, the border control, and say, listen, if I'm going to Belfast, Londonderry, Glasgow, you know, I accept that. That's an occupational hazard, so to speak. You know, not keeping me and my family, you know, hours at the time at Gatwick, Luton, Stansted, Heathrow, you know, wherever I went, it got so regular. But, you know, they try and recruit, they still used to try and recruit me. And they'd say things like, when it was decommissioning, you know, they'd say, for example, you know, what you're going to do with any weapons. Don't forget, this is after to prison. You know, what you're going to do with all your weapons or whatever. And I used to say, well, I'll tell you what, you show me a list and you tell me where all the Republican weapons have gone, and I'll tell you where's one. They're never going to do that. They're never going to tell you that. So as far as we were concerned, don't ask us. Don't ask us. Are there still things? There's still things. You know, there's still things there. The likelihood of them ever going to get used? Not on my watch. Let's put it that way.
A lot gets made, probably more so in the north, but the collusion that occurred at times between British security forces and loyalists. Did you come across any in your time?
Well, I knew someone who was quite open about it, where there wasn't it somebody? I don't know if I've got the name right. Wasn't it Lachlan McGlynn? And it kicked off a whole posters were put up, montages of you know, suspected, you know, IRA members, and there were hundreds of them. We had them here. We had them in England. We were getting them off of army people. You know, we were getting them off of army people that we knew.
Sorry, the army were giving you what?
They were like montages, you know, where they'd stop people at checkpoints and different, and they'd you know, accumulate information, sort of photo where they lived, you know, what car they drove and all that, and then they would put onto like a montage, like an A4 piece of paper, and you'd have a dozen of these. So to prove, I remember at the time it was almost to prove that there was collusion, because in Belfast they pasted them on all the walls as if to say, well, where do you think we get these? Because what they were saying was that the UDA couldn't get access or weren't capable of taking out IRA men. So they put the montages up as if to say, well, you know, we know they are. But at the same time, it proved that they'd gotten them off of either the IUC or members of the army. Presumably the UK as well.
these were active army members. Were they given them like directly to ye, the London
People
UDA?
we knew on the main. We had hundreds of them. We had hundreds of them. And you know, I remember passing them on to people, which we didn't need to do because they already had them there anyway. So yeah, I think there is somebody that I know, and I thought he was quite open about it. He basically said he'd got information. He got time. He was a Loyalist prisoner, and he was quite open about there was collusion to some degree. Look, if you're standing in a bar and your mates in the UDR, you know, or the RUC, and he's got some information on an IRA man or an inland man or IPLO or whatever, you tell him he's not going to tell you. You know, he's going to, you know, not all of them, not necessarily all of them. I don't suspect all of them. It must have happened. It must have happened. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, there's definitely plenty of documented cases,
Yes.
and more than just passing information. I mean, actively, like their agents actively killing while being agents. Yeah. Okay, so when was it that you stopped completely? And because I mean, I don't think you'd be involved in any kind of loyalist activity now. Not even paramilitary.
I mean, what I did do years later, I mean, I was never so I never remember the Orange Order. I was never remember the Apprentice Boys. And a few years ago, I did actually enjoy the Apprentice. I did join the Apprentice Boys. Now, that was because I had an interest in the relationship between London and Londonderry, and you know, the corporations that were associated and so on. But the main thing was I had no responsibility, just a member. I was just a member. Don't want to sit on any committees, don't want to sit on the top table, just quite happy to go along occasional meeting. I'll go over to Londonderry in December. I'll go over for the 12th because I like the bands. I like to see the bands. But politically active, certainly not militant. So that would have ended. I think what happened was we formed something called the British Ulster Alliance. So that was purely political. So that's how we had a flute band. We formed a flute band. We had a flute band. Which one did we form? That 200 to 205, and that lasted 16 years, 15, 16 years. I played the bass drum for a while. Not that I was a musician, far from it. I was just a big mouth who suggested we form a band. So I felt obliged to do something then. So I landed up playing a bass drum for a while.
Do you look back, like if you could have told your younger self that the way to go about this isn't violence, or you know, it's through political peaceful means, would you, if you could, would you go back and tell young Frank that?
Yeah, probably. I'd like to think so. I'd like to think so. You know, I've said to people before now, people are, you know, some Irish friends I've got, and I've said I understand the concerns of the nationalist community, you know, the Catholic nationalist community. I just wish they'd gone the way of the SDLP. I wish it had been done politically. Even though I'm not suggesting they weren't under pressure. I'm not saying that they at different times were not under threat from, you know, some Loyalist paramilitaries. But I don't believe it would have escalated to the degree that it did. Because I think once the perception was, oh well, everybody in a certain part of West Belfast all support the IRA. Well, the gloves are off, aren't they? Nobody. Even the most moderate people, you know, even the most moderate SDLP politicians, you know, who didn't want violence, certainly didn't want terrorism. Eventually, they got looked at as being no better. So it's, you know, that I think that's I mean, apart from my own involvement, you know, the regrets for that. I wish people had done that. I wish they'd have chosen the political route. And then, you know, of legitimately won the sympathy, understanding, or whatever from the other community, or people based on the mainland. and let politicians sort it out, not paramilitary.
If tomorrow there was a vote up in the north as to whether to stay part of the UK or to rejoin the Republic, and the population voted to join 32 counties, would you feel any sort of way about it now, or would you be like, yeah, listen, that's
I had a feeling you was going to ask that question, John. I had a feeling you was going to ask that question. I find that a very difficult question. A few years ago, not that many years ago, I'd have probably said, no, I'm not prepared to accept that. I'm not prepared. I've gone through too much, and I know other people have gone through too much to just give it all up as passively as that. So, but then what does that mean? What does that mean? You're going to return to being a militant? Does that mean you're going to play some kind of conduit role, if you like, so you are passively supporting it? It's a very, very difficult question. My instinct would be no. I wouldn't want there to be any more violence. Don't want to go to any more funerals. Don't want to go visit any more people in prison. Just try again, as I said, with the situation with the SDLP, try and sort it out politically. And after that, I wouldn't put too much imagination in it.
If it did happen, would you feel like Britain, like the British Empire lost something, or that Britain kind of would you feel a loss like as a Brit, or would it just be
I feel sorry for the people that I know. I'd feel sorry for all the Loyalist prisoners I've known, all the wives, the children, the communities that suffered. I feel very sad for them, because I know how loyal they've been, and the commitment that they've made. That after all that, and therefore, look, it's like young men now, right? There's a school of thought that says that paramilitaries have never had so many membership amongst young people, right? You know what? They ain't got to do anything. They haven't got to do anything, have they? So, and that's good. I'm glad they've got nothing to do. But I understand if your older brothers, cousins, uncles, your father, your grandfather, if they done their bit, for want of a better way of putting it, since the late 60s, they've been interned, they've gone to prison, they may have suffered some sort of violence. If that's how your family's known in that street, I can understand the kudos involved with that. You don't want to break that line, do you? You want to be seen. You want to be known as a member of whichever Loyalist organisation. That doesn't bother me, as long as there's peace. Roll the shirt, get all the tattoos you want, wear all the badges you want, all the t-shirts, but leave it at that.
Let's see. Listen, we've come to the end. Thank you very much now for all your time.
It's been a pleasure. It's been nice. Believe it or not, I've listened to every one of your podcasts.
Come again.
I've listened to all of the podcasts.
Oh wait, seriously?
Yeah, and they're very interesting. And I think the more it encourages people to sit around and talk like this and have a bit of insight, it can be polite conversation, can't it? And a better understanding.
I appreciate it. When did you first, when I emailed you, or did you see any before?
Oh, I'd seen it before that. Oh no, I was watching them before that. Yeah, it come up on YouTube, and I thought I'll take a look at that, and it's been very interesting. But there's not a good eclectic group of guests. Very good.
Thank you.
In the future, carry on doing it.
Absolutely, that means the world to me now, honestly. What I want from the Troubles type episodes is just to provide the most well-rounded view of it as I can. Not by no means one-sided. I want to.
I've seen that. No, I've seen that, and I think you asked some very pertinent questions. And from my point of view, all I would say, it's very, very difficult to kind of trim down sort of like 30 or 40 years. It's trying to give a selection of different scenarios, different thought processes at different times. As I've said to you, I cannot believe sometimes that you allowed yourself. I mean, I went to Sunday school. How did it go from, loving everybody and being nice to it, you know, wanting to go out. And I'll finish with one last. I'll finish. When I got caught, I was glad. I said to my wife, "I'm glad I got caught." And she said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Where did you think this was going to end?" She said, "You can't be in charge. You can't have guns wrapped around you and not use them. You called it on. You wanted to be the one in charge. Now, you know." She couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe it. And I'll say this. I've said this. I believe if I lived in Northern Ireland, I'd have either been dead or doing a very, very long prison sentence. Anyway, and the good news is my team's improved. My team's improved, Tottenham.
Ironically, though, if you had been charged as like a paramilitary, you might actually be out because of the Good Friday. Ironically enough,
yeah, no, that's a point. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, that's a point.
That's funny. Yeah. Again, mate, thank you for everything you shared.
Thanks for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Really nice to meet you. Really nice to meet you. And,
likewise, if you're ever over in New York sometime, give me a shout there. Likewise, if I'm in London.
There's just a little problem, John. You're more than welcome to meet up in London. I'm just not allowed to come to New York, unfortunately.
Because of your charges?
Because of the charges. So you have to tell me when you're coming to London. I'll buy you a Guinness here. I'll buy you a pint of Guinness. Yeah.
Fair enough. So, pleasure. Is there anything you want to leave us with? Any kind of parting words or anything?
No, that's fine. No, I've tried to be as elaborate as possible. And yeah, as I say, I wish you all the best with your project in the future.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time, mate.
You're welcome. Cheers, mate.